like you that all must be destroyed. It's because of men like you that all must be destroyed. None of those risks have been seen, at least not by anyone who still remains alive. None of those risks have been seen, at least not by anyone who still remains alive.
Hello. Yeah, that being said, hi. Welcome to X Studios Cleveland, or the X Studios Live. I am Andrew in Cleveland. This is a weekly show where we talk about stuff and we make music and we play with stuff, possibly ourselves, but who can tell? Hopefully, everyone can hear me okay. We'll go ahead and get started here. So, today we have a special guest. Star of stage, screen, and music. This is Justin from Chicago. Hi, Justin. How are you? I am doing great, thank you. It's been so long since we've talked. I know, since like this morning at least. So Justin is the brains behind Subsoma. Subsoma. I'm really essy today for some reason. Some sibilance. So before we get started with like actually talking about anything useful, I just want to make sure folks in the chat room that you can hear myself and Justin okay. Please let me know in the chat. I just want to make sure before we get too deep into things that everything's cool. Been changing things around, everything like that, so I want to make sure that everything's fine. I have using a different microphone now. It's a lot less boxy sounding than the other one. Have it running into a bunch of shit over here. Move some stuff around. My camera's on like extreme close-up mode right now, so I feel very vulnerable. Thank you, Jody. I know, right? I love this camera. You hear Justin okay as well, I guess? I'm going to assume so, even though I've been talking the entire time. No one can hear you because you're not talking, ass! All right. I just had not hearing Justin. Let me try doing something here real quick. And this is why we test this stuff out. Okay, Justin, talk again.
Hi.
Very good.
Yeah, I actually heard that. I heard that echo.
All right, that's a good sign. So we're better off as far as that's concerned. I just forgot to turn you on, apparently.
No worries. You always turn me on, Andrew.
Well, thank you, baby. All right, cool. So it sounds like everything's working. Great. So, Justin, you just released an album from what I understand.
Yes, indeed.
Congratulations on that. We're actually going to be giving away a couple copies of Subsoma's new album, Automation. If you want to get in on that in the chat room, just type in exclamation mark raffle, all no spaces, and that'll sign you up automatically for the raffle. And then during the music breaks, when we get winners, I will send you the download code for that as well as how to redeem it. So that's exciting. So, Justin, for the folks that don't know you, which who doesn't, why don't you tell us a little bit about Justin?
Sure. Well, I would say that I'm a musician, producer, based in Chicago, previously of Cleveland. Been doing the music racket since I was a teenager. Started out punk bands, moved on to sort of new wave, synth pop, industrial, played in industrial bands throughout the 90s, and then took a very long sabbatical. Other than doing a few pieces here and there, took about a 10-15 year sabbatical. And thanks to you, started making music again in the mid 2010s. And I'm back into it and been working a lot with other X members, such as yourself, to do things like the RPM challenge and Spooky Action at Distance. And then this sort of project I was working in the background a few years ago resulted in Compartments, which was released in 2018. And then this last year, which was particularly difficult, ended up releasing this album in a very short period.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. You started up Subsoma mid to 2010s?
Yeah, I had a concept that I started maybe around 2013, and it just stayed as a concept, and I would play with things or try to set up a rig because I didn't have a lot of outboard gear or a very good music designated computer at that time. And started to invest more and more in that. And my original tracks were all based around my MPC 5000 rather than any sort of DAW. And that all sort of evolved. And after we did the RPM challenge the first year, it really motivated me. And for whatever reason, I cranked out the rest of that album shortly thereafter.
Awesome. And that came out in about 2 years ago, right? The 2 years?
Yeah, I think it was like early summer, late spring 2018.
Okay, that's right.
Yeah. This thing would have been done earlier, but due to injuries and then obviously the situation in which we find ourselves made me had to change some of the post-production.
Sure. Yeah, so Automation is the name of the new album. What can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't want to get too heady and philosophical, but most of everything I do sort of has a double meaning. Very specifically, I've been doing a lot of reading and thinking in the last few years. I work in information technology, and I've always been very interested in things like AI, machine learning. But beyond that, I sort of had this feeling. I wouldn't say that I'm particularly political, but I do think about the sociological consequences of technology, which maybe when I was younger, I was so enamored with that I didn't maybe consider those things. And in part, like the impact that automations, both in terms of machine learning and in terms of robotics, will have on our society and how people will think about them. So that is sort of one sort of political undercurrent. The other is sort of more deeply emotional, and I used a sort of 80s model, or the Vince Clarke model of cold electronics and trying to insert more emotive elements, whether they're vocals or whatever, because I've always felt that bifurcation. And to me, this almost became a story, like a concept album. I didn't realize I was doing it, and this may seem a little cliche and tired, but I feel like it's something that's becoming more a real possibility, which is we could develop systems that are deep learning systems that are at some point super cognizant of themselves. And so I use that as a way to say, what if this thing became cognizant of itself, and how would it struggle with its own awareness, the way humans would of their own humanity? So a lot of these songs are that, like various points in that interaction between people and ghosts or machine entities. So I know that sounds pretty out there, but that's kind of the the concept.
Well, I mean, I let's dive in. Why not?
Sure, absolutely. No, absolutely. And each track, I mean, I can talk about that with each track. Each one has its sort of piece in that story. Mm-hmm. So even though the tracks aren't necessarily in a particular order in terms of their concept, like it's not a straight narrative in that way. In fact, I arrange the tracks based on dynamics and stuff you think about rather than the actual meaning of each song.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So that's a great segue. So let's get into and then we'll come back and we'll talk about the first track on Automation, which is the title track, Automation.
Awesome.
You planned that out well. Hopefully this works again. Experimenting with new ways of doing stuff. So hopefully y'all can hear this. So here is the first track on Subsoma's Automation. It's the second album by Subsoma, and this is Automation. And that was Automation by Subsoma off of the Subsoma's album Automation. Ironically enough. And amazingly enough, Subsoma's here. Folks that are just joining in. It's Justin from Subsoma out of Chicago. Thanks for coming in and watching today. So, Justin, let's talk a little bit about this track.
Yeah, so this is not really an intentional track. The way I work is sometimes a little haphazard. Sometimes I start with the title, sometimes I don't. This one was one that I didn't, and it wasn't even one of the first tracks. Mm-hmm. But I think most people who make music, and especially if they're working in the album format, know, or at least they feel they know when they've got that song that should be the track. I felt that way about the last album too. But the way I tied this into the concept is it was sort of a beginning. It was also trying to be emotive and show a little bit more the positive side of this concept. Almost trying to demonstrate some of the enthusiasm, mm-hmm. That the technology breeds. And when you have that enthusiasm, you sort of are on this high and you're not necessarily thinking about the consequences. So in that way, I think it was a good way to start this, because I feel that's where the concept starts, right? Is people doing stuff that's cool, and then, later bad stuff. So it starts with tequila. Starts with the technology tequila shots and ends where you expect it's going to.
Right. Everyone's optimistic about the future, and then suddenly they realize that the future is going to kind of blow chunks sometimes.
Yeah, a little bit.
Like, I wasn't expecting that to happen kind of moments.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much you want to get into the instruments used, but
sure. Well, there's enough people that are into that, so.
Yeah, this is one that throughout this album, I actually I use a mix of outboard and in the box stuff. But one thing that I had to use in the box, because I'm not a millionaire with crazy connections, is I use the Waldorf PPG emulation software. Mm-hmm. So it's like really raw, old school wavetable-y sounds, and that's the sound that you hear there in the lead. Mm-hmm. And I used a lot of the lead sounds were using that PPG sound. This is before I bought the ASM Hydrosynth. I probably could have used it for that. I probably could have used a Waldorf too, but there was something really haunting about that emulation of Wolfgang Palm's PPG that really, really loved. It was a combination.
There's a certain lo-fi sound to it. Like you couldn't get in the Blofeld. Yeah,
because Palm was working with, frankly, rudimentary technology to do digital stuff, right? And, also the analog filters on the PPG. If you mix those together, you had something unique.
Absolutely. No, I think it sounds really cool. Some comments in the chat room. Dan Kushner says it reminds him of mid-90s sci-fi CD-ROM video games.
Right.
I can't remember. There was a Cyberpunk CD-ROM game that came out that had Dennis Hopper in it. I can't remember what it was called.
Oh yeah.
Oh shit! I have to look it up now. Oh my god. Sam Harmon, Glacial 23. Hey buddy. Says PPG forever. Information Trade John says, I love vocal-like synth sounds that took the place of actual vocals coming from another dude who can't sing a note.
Yeah, there's a whole backstory behind that too, which I know you're aware of, which is I'll do a shout out to the French-Canadian company Plogue. I think they're based out of Montreal. They make this amazing software, and I feel like I'm going to not be like the Wizard of Oz, and I'm more than happy to open up the curtain here. Mm-hmm. But the Plogue stuff, specifically Chip Speech and Alter Ego, are the two tools I use the most. And they're unique because these guys are super, super nerds when it comes to emulating 60s and 70s and I guess early 80s voice emulation software that was used by Bell Labs, etc. And they spent so much attention to detail there, and then taking that and augmenting it so you could do cooler stuff with it, mm-hmm. and then mixing that with a ton of effects. I was able to get almost a vocoded sound but it also has some expression, and able to put that sort of expression into it, because I think that was probably the intention of those original machines, was when people were talking to automated services or whatever, they felt like there was a little inflection or a little humanity, because no one wants to talk to a robot, at least. Well, I do, but
I
most
know.
people don't. And so, yeah, so I think that just was a happy find for me.
Yeah, Ploga is just like that stuff is really cool. How they're doing that modeling is just nuts. And I know, did you see the one that's like I think it's modeled after like the Sega Genesis?
Yeah, I can't. There's another tool that they have. Shoot, I can't think of what it's called, but yeah, they do a bunch of chiptune stuff.
Alter
They're
Ego and
all
that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of it. It's chip something. Shoot.
Yeah,
Anywho, sorry, Plug. But yeah, I don't use it very much because I'm not like a chiptune person.
sure.
Uh, I mean, I am. I listen to it. I just don't make it because it's its own thing.
Yeah, yeah. I don't want to get into that genre.
Yeah.
The only time I ever listened to chiptunes is I have a Christmas album of chiptunes.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and it's like it's like this Christmas song in the style of Super Mario Brothers or Tetris or Mega Man. So it's, I think it's 8-Bit Saviors, I think is what it's called, or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's silliness.
I tend to take things and incorporate them rather than try to emulate. And so to
Sure.
me, I like the chiptune stuff. And I know there's been a lot of controversy about this particular artist, but I would say successfully incorporating chiptunes would be like Crystal Castles.
Mm-hmm.
Not the main focus, but it enhances it, makes it interesting.
Oh, absolutely. No, I agree. And I think that's a big thing, is just like, coming up with pulling stuff into what you're doing from various genres and everything like that is kind of a, and kind of making it into your original thing is definitely something that you're really good at doing. There's a lot of non-classifiable stuff that you're putting into stuff and everything. And it's one of the things I dig about it.
Oh, well, thanks.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I'm an eclectic person. At any time, we'll get to this later, probably what, I'm working on in general, but I would say that, like aspects of lots of different kinds of music, never successfully sought to emulate too much one particular band. Oftentimes just philosophically, because if it's been stated really well, I mean, if you want to be a tribute of some kind, and I do have a lot of nostalgia and I do tribute stuff,
Sure.
but I'm more interested in sort of breaking new ground, and everybody's got something different to offer. And for me, it's my love of, elements of hip hop and elements of industrial and elements of other things, of IDM, and just sort of wrapping that all up together to do something kind of different.
Yeah. Oh, no doubt. No, that's what's a lovely thing. There is definitely kind of a retro sound to what you're doing, but it's not like a rehash of stuff that's already out there kind of thing. So there's enough weird shit that's going on there.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm not quite writing Lenny Kravitz albums where like every song is a tribute to my favorite 70s band.
That's the next Subsoma album, isn't it? So the next track that we're going to play is called Mechanical. And we'll play that, and then we'll talk about that here on Nick Studios. This is Mechanical by Subsoma. That was Mechanical by Subsoma here at X Studios Cleveland's X Studios Live. Oh God, I can't come up with good names for shit worth a damn. Only bad band names. So Mechanical, quite a bit of a different tone from Automation.
Yeah. Yeah, from the sort of concept album space, this is the Conflict Begins track. Yeah, definitely drew on some sort of my love for late 80s and early 90s industrial for some of it, especially the backing stuff. So yeah, I wanted to be a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more upbeat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the bass line you can definitely has that kind of thing is very.
Yeah, I feel like I'm, reaching into the bag for a little Bill Lee early days there, but.
Yeah, and the pissy lead that you got going on there is fantastic. I love that. It reminds me of some of like the stuff off of Navigator by Formatadra.
Oh yeah, best album.
Yeah, no, I know you hate that band. Did you see that he just re-released it?
Did not. I know that we were over on his site checking out some of his stuff.
Yeah, he just re-released it on Bandcamp with remixes and demos and stuff like that as well, and some unreleased material. So.
That is great, because that's a guy, Andreas Meyer, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
Really brilliant.
Yeah.
Really underrated.
Yeah, and everything after Navigator became unlistenable.
You never understand in the life of an artist what they're going to do or where they're going.
That's true.
But yeah, I mean, he did Newt, I think, with
Daniel Meyer. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that was super cool.
Yeah.
And then I think he just kind of went into a very, very ambient phase.
Yeah.
I mean, so ambient that even Brian Eno would fall asleep. So I really don't know.
So how does this album, in your mind, compare to Compartments, your first album?
Sure. Yeah, I would say they're very different in some ways. I was exploring a lot of alienation in that first album.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading a lot of J.G. Ballard. I was having a lot of issues somewhat in my personal life. And so it was tying together a lot of those sort of feelings. However, it was more of a potpourri. Like I didn't have a clear musical theme for that album because I think I was exploring what I could do rather than thinking about consistency. Whereas I think this one is a little bit more minimalist, I'm maybe showing off a little less, but and trying to do more with less. And it's also more of a solid concept.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, because the stuff I learned from the first album was where what I would want to do, what I would want to do next, and able to filter that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I noticed that you were definitely using a lot less tracks this time around.
That was intentional. Yeah, I disciplined myself, I think, to no more than 8 tracks, and pre-mixing all the drums. I did a lot of the drums on the Akai MPC.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out to my MPC 2000 XL. Is that I sort of pre-mixed the drums that way rather than turning them into their own tracks, because I find that frankly very tedious. I still miss the days of miking punk rock drums by hanging the mic over the top of the drum set.
Just one mic though. If you're doing
one
rock,
mic,
I mean, and you're lucky that it's actually hung over something, and not just sitting right in front of the kick drum. Good enough.
Yeah, I'm not one of those folks that wants 40 million tracks anyway, but I was going way over before, and so now I'm like, I want to clear some space and create a little more headroom.
Yeah, I'm just finishing up the mixing for Plasma Blackout. It was funny because I was doing the exact opposite, where I'm like, every drum has to be on its own track. But I also do stupid shit like I'm going to pan the hi-hats left and right and make you dizzy.
Well, I will say this. I'll shout out to you that you did actually mix most of this album and did a lot of cool post-production effects, including stuff we'll get to later where you use some of your Pan-terrific stuff.
My ass backwards way of doing the automation pans.
Well, you get the job done, and then later.
It just took like 10 minutes to 10 extra minutes to do that whole thing, and be like, you're like, I'm gonna go get a cup of coffee. All right.
Yeah. What is it? To quote to quote your former outfit, Missile Command, I would say that computers should think people should work,
Yeah,
right?
right. Machine should think people should work. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's just that was fun though. I mean, I appreciate you, trusting me with this, with the music and everything like that, because it was a blast doing it and experimenting, and it's nice letting you, or having you let me kind of dive in and mess with stuff enough.
No, it's cool. It's real. I think, and we talked about this before when we've talked, that I find mixing my own work to be dreadful.
Oh yeah,
I might even be with Adam Boos. Another shout out to Adam Boos for a mastering engineer in Cauliflower Audio. He says he hates mixing, and I totally get it. It's soul sucking, and I guess some people. And I see the beauty in it, and I love a good mix. But oh my gosh,
I get really confused when I mix. Like literally, it's like if I'm not writing things down or marking something a certain way, then I'm just like, where the fuck am I? What's going on?
yeah,
And I'm like, oh, and then I end up just like not saving it and restarting it from scratch like 12 times and being angry and frustrated. I hate mixing. But I don't mind mixing your stuff. But yeah, I hate.
well, well, I think having less tracks and keeping it more minimal, like a lot of this album is, probably makes it easier, makes the ear fatigue a little easier, at least on me, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we busted through the mixing on this pretty quickly.
Yeah,
Once we sat down and did it, so.
I pre-mixed a lot of it because, in part, a lot of the work I do is, I think that musician to producer, I don't want to go too off topic, but musician to producer has become a more fluid thing.
Yeah.
Starting out, it was more a question of just writing the music and then letting some other person sort of do the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But the way workflows are with DAWs now, you really, I don't think a good electronic musician can ignore pre-production is a very important part of it.
No, I agree. Yeah. I also think as like for some reason as electronic musicians, we're also kind of studio junkies anyway.
To be fair,
yeah. And I think that's kind of a weird thing because I know more people who are electronic musicians that are, that jump in and do all their own production work than I do like guitar players or singers or that kind of thing, or drummers or bass players.
Yeah, I also think it can draw you into the dark side of the force because you get guys like Yoad Nevo, who I think is a guitar player and songwriter.
Mm-hmm.
Who I think he's been fully indoctrinated now into the synth and pro audio world.
Yeah. Yeah, he's so deep in the studio, he's never leaving. That's why all the episodes of Sonic Talk with him in it, he's in his studio.
Yeah, totally. If I had a rig like that, I might sleep on the floor there too. I'm just saying.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so it's just been so it's funny to think about how much. I was looking at stuff today, because I'm thinking about of course studio upgrades and everything like that, and like I'm not even looking at synthesizers right now or musical instruments at all. I'm looking at stuff like I need new monitors really bad, and I need I want to replace some of my studio equipment right now is kind of where I'm sitting. It's like I feel like, as weird as it sounds, I feel like I'm okay for synths right now.
Wow.
There's nothing that's really jumping out at me at the moment.
Sure.
And again, it's part of that philosophy that I've been kind of trying to grab onto of, do I have something that does this already?
Yeah.
And really that's kind of the thing right now. And I feel like I have enough shit that does stuff that I can focus on that instead of trying to buy new shit and, losing focus on these things.
Yeah. I mean, for this album, I pretty much only used outboard gear. And you've seen my rig. I've got the Prophet 6 module and the Prophet Rev 2 16-voice module in front of me. And so those, I'm pretty sure those are the only outboard pieces that I used other than the Akai MPC 2000. Sure. So like, to me, I you can't see it, but I have a lot of stuff. And I do think that having too much stuff is terrible. Mm-hmm. It is. I mean, I know this is well stated by others who are more astute than myself, but I think having limitations is good.
Yeah.
And even when I talk about limitations, I've got two of the most powerful polysynths available. It's not like I'm sitting here with a one voice like Moog Rogue,
Right.
and I'm like a Dr. Beat or something, but still, it's a thing.
Yeah. I just yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that it just what's our what is the stuff that we need to work on right now? And it's funny because I'm going back into stuff that I've had sitting around for a while and learning stuff that I didn't know about it. I'm gonna do
Yeah.
I'm gonna do a stream where I'm literally like going in and deep diving the MS-2000, which
Very
I
cool.
bought that in like 2000. So this is like 20-year-old synth and stuff like that. And I've never programmed the motion sequencer on it before. I've never bothered using any of the actual features of the thing because I was literally just banging on it when I was in Filament 38 and yelling into the vocoder. So it's like now I can actually,
Which is good.
which worked fine.
It's good work if you can get it.
Yeah,
Andrew,
the game was fun, but it's like I need to go in and kind of examine it a little bit more now and like sit down with it and noodle with it and play with it and much like puberty, I need to sit down and play with it.
Yeah, I do think that that's a trap, and I feel in good company when I see other folks, whether it's Junkie XL or Ty Unwin, who are successful in their field, who have similar problems, which is like it's the shiny object problem, right? And yeah, that's the thing, and you have to start making both monetary and just creative workflow decisions at some point.
Yeah.
Look, I need a limit to this or that. So, I mean, I've started playing bass and guitar again a little bit, and then of course had to junkie up on pedals. But I bought a pedal case, and I'm limiting myself. At this point, I think I have 6 pedals on there, and that's it because that's all that I can fit in there. And I'm like, okay, enough, enough. I don't need like a 12-foot deep shoegaze pedal rack yet. But it's purposeful limiting, and I think it's good.
No, I agree. So the next track we're going to listen to is called Inversion. So this will be cool. I like this track a lot. Actually, I like all the tracks. I'm just a big fan of this album. I'll listen to this damn album. I've listened to it like 6 times so far since yesterday. And not just so we can get like points on iTunes or something like that. Like I was literally just kind of like, yeah. And then also like when I was setting up the stream this morning, I'm like, I'm going to listen to everything while I'm going through and make sure it sounds good. Yeah.
Well, I'm humble, thank you.
Whatever. All right, so Inversion here by Subsoma here at X Studios Live. That was inversion by Subsoma, who is also here on X Studios Live today. I'm Andrew. That's Justin over there. Let me do that. Okay, there we go. There. Wait, no. There you go. Justin's down there. I'm right here. Why did I bother doing that? That was dumb. Anyway. So talk about inversion with me a little bit. This is again, now we're getting into a very more, our mood's dropping.
Yes, this is from again to the narrative. It's sort of the quiet self-awareness song. I am like by no means an expert in mindfulness, but if I were, this is kind of the feeling I'm going for. Definitely. You can hear I'm using some interesting things about the PPG and pigments in this one, Arturia pigments, to get some super digitally weird stuff. But yeah, I kind of wanted to try to do a chill track, like a really chill track. And I think this is about as close as I can get, to be totally frank. I don't think I'm hardwired for too much chill, but yeah, it was definitely interesting. But yeah, from that perspective, it's just meant to sort of bring you in and make you think about things. And in this context of this narrative, it's like, you know, the entity or the AI entity becoming aware of itself and sort of starting to really think, have a deep think. So, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, you can hear another trick that I do a lot is drum layering, which I'm sure you're aware. And so I will say that I use, you know, MPC style drums, and then I'll put like more analog style drum machine sounds layered underneath it. And in this one, I found that challenging because I was trying to keep it quiet. And so if I keep stacking drums, it's going to be a little crazy. So I wrote this thing on Spark, which was really mellow. And it just sort of formed that sort of like pitter patter underneath rhythm for everything.
Sort of like a nice low key chill out thing, using stuff like the kick rolls and stuff like that you had going on in there. It was kind of a neat effect.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I do put a lot of effects on drums. Oh, yeah. Very, very often I will have a straight drum track that's just super compressed. And I use a really cool compressor. Shout out to Goodhertz. It's the Wolf compressor, and it literally will just take the polish right off your teeth. And then I'll have another layered one that's affected using sort of like glitch effects and glitch technique, so that and it's hard because very often when I'm recording things, it's some of the stuff is pseudo random in the sense that I can't predict what it's going to be like. So I very often will do multiple recording passes because I don't know how it's going to manifest until I actually play.
It's also got like kind of like a bit crunched kind of sound to it as well sometimes too. And I'm not sure if that's just the plug voices, but I think it's also some of like the kicks and stuff like that. I'll hear that little kind of.
Yeah, so on the MPC, I will use lower bit. I'll use like 12 bit or lower sample rates for things, and it gives it a real nice crunch. I think that's why I can't get away from using things like that, because they can deliver really well. That's
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's funny. I just got an email saying that Samples from Mars is giving away an MPC 2000 XL,
Oh, no
and
way.
like all of their samples. And I'm like, oh,
Wow.
like, that's cute.
Yeah, I have some retrofits or mods on this
Mm-hmm.
one, such as the CF card mod,
Mm-hmm.
because otherwise I'd be holding a handful of floppies. I'm trying to not live that life too much.
I understand. I mean, living your life holding floppies in your hand all day is.
I used to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the EPS 16 Plus was, at least when I first started, all
Oh
floppy
yeah.
driven. So
Yeah. I just remember watching old Skinny Puppy concerts, and they had like literally the floppy disks like going across the keyboard, up on right above the key bed, and you see them like swapping these things out. And I guess that's just
wow.
let Ogre like growl and get covered in some vomit for a little bit while we change out the samples. It's a good trick, I guess, right?
Yeah, somewhere is a smelly box full of vomit covered floppies in Kevin Key's attic.
Probably.
It's like, yeah.
It's like the electronic musician's equivalent to a Donna Summers costume change.
Oh my gosh. Nice. Nice reference.
Thank you. Yeah. So it's interesting because this album takes a number of mood turns, um, and I'm wondering, like I know that you said that a lot of this is like part of the concept that you were working on with this whole thing, but how much of this is also kind of tied into just like what you've been going through the past year and everything like that too?
Yeah, it's been kind of a crazy year. There's been a lot of good
Mm-hmm.
things and a lot of challenging
Mm-hmm.
things. Coming here was really good choice for me, I think. It was challenging in lots of other ways. Suffering with a knee injury, and then with the loss of my
Mm-hmm.
mother in 2019, and it's just coming up on a year actually
Yeah.
for that. So I dedicated the album to my mom, who was also a
Mm-hmm.
musician, family of musicians, and always encouraged me, even if she could not understand,
Mm-hmm.
what I was doing or why. Always supported me. So
Nice.
yeah, no, I mean a lot of the stuff, and while I was writing it, a shout out to my partner Jody, who sat down with me, and I think I would have scrapped a lot of material if she hadn't been like, "No, this is good. You should keep carrying
Mm-hmm.
on." Many hours sitting in a stool next to me, just being my
Mm-hmm.
ears, because it's I definitely needed that
Sure.
objectivity.
Oh yeah, no doubt. I mean, that's kind of that's definitely having somebody there to support you with that kind of stuff is very, yeah, makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, I mean, it was just yeah, it's challenging because I throw away so much
Mm-hmm.
work. And I'm sure you know what this is like, which is like you do it and you throw it away. Uh, Instead of maybe trying to make do with what you
Mm-hmm.
have, and as you know, she's a visual artist and works in metals and materials like that,
Right.
where, if you bend something the wrong way, you can't just throw it in the garbage and get another piece of metal. You have to bend it. You have to, yeah, you got to bend it to your will and sort of
Oh,
persevere. So,
absolutely.
oh, I just caught a load of that shirt, which is brilliant,
Oh,
by the
thank
way.
you. For some reason, my
Yeah.
video just froze on my main camera. So
Uh,
sorry about that, folks. Um, you might have to just stare at me staring down at things for a little bit. Apparently, there we go. I'm back. Apparently, might have overheated.
but yeah, the dynamics. I'll be honest. Like I sort of tried to plot the dynamics in terms of the track
Sure.
list. I know in this day and age, track lists are maybe not so important. This album probably would never be mastered for vinyl or any media that would be suitable. But I think people, and I do too, out of sheer laziness, is just play, albums like
Mm-hmm.
playlists. So I did try to give some thought to that in terms of breaking it up in terms of upbeat and low beat
Sure.
dynamics. So it wasn't just like a Nitzareb album that was all like in the key of C at 130 BPM
Right.
straight.
I mean, I've been doing less playlist listening nowadays and more album listening. Yeah,
Interesting.
I mean, it's just like every day I'm going for a walk right now. I mean, not right now. Obviously, I'm sitting on my ass, but I'll do like 3 mile walk every day, and I'll put an album on while I'm doing that. Or in the morning when I'm eating
Yeah.
breakfast before working, I literally put a record on and listen to the whole record while I'm eating breakfast and drinking coffee and stuff like that.
I do miss your listening parties, which were, and I am privileged enough to know people that lived in the 70s and early 80s who were older than I, who this was very common for people to sit down and listen to albums,
Yeah.
and as a structured thing. So yeah, the Jean-Michel Jarre one was brilliant. And,
The listening dinner.
I think that yeah, very cool idea.
One course per oxygen.
Absolutely. Well, I feel like there's some benefit to that. And I don't really address this as a theme in the album, but I will just say off the cuff that I feel somewhat a victim to. I sort of consider myself to be of a counterculture mindset, but I find that I've been sucked into a lot of the negative parts about the internet, especially affecting my attention span. And as you know, I got off social media a number of years ago because I just found it to be sort of not helping my brain much.
Sure.
You can tell how well crafted that sentence was, how well my brain's doing. But definitely, a thing where like, you become very, what's the word I'm looking for? Scatterbrained, right? And listen to this and listen to that. I remember, showing my age here, sitting down and listening to like Solutions, the Hajab album, and just listening to it from beginning to end on CD, obviously at that point, and just being like, this thing sounds friggin' great in this format.
Yeah, right.
Or Navigator. You brought up Navigator.
Yeah.
That's another album that you almost have to listen to, in my opinion, in that order. It's like,
it was funny. I was the other day I was listening to "Tyranny for You" by Front 242, like straight through.
Great album.
And I forgot how like amazing that album is, right? And B, how much it needs to be remastered. And I know that Noise Theorem posted about that the other day as well, and it was funny because it was like he posted right after I listened to it the day before, and I was just kind of like, dude, yeah, right. And I think actually he's not on here, so he can't tell me I can't say it, but I believe Adam Boost remastered it.
Oh, no kidding.
He made a remaster of it, and he just like, he's like, oh my God, it sounds so good. I'm like, send it to me. And he's like, no, I can't. And I'm like, fucking I want to hear that.
Yeah, no, arguably, like, their best album.
Yeah, I agree. It's so weird. Like
Yeah,
listening to everything
weird.
that they're doing in that thing is just kind of like, it's just like really kind of sitting down and focusing on what is going on that album is just just amazing to me from a production standpoint.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I actually, Jody and I have been listening to a number of sort of Belgian new beat tracks, and it's sort of their place in that, because I mean, it was kind of like the Beatlemania phenomenon,
Right?
Because there was all this going on with rock and skiffle mixing together, making a thing, and then it comes back at the United States, which is obviously the origin. African-based music is the origin of blues and rock,
Right?
And this totally different sort of twist, right, which was brilliant. And to me, like, I don't think many Americans at the time were aware of. I mean, there was no Belgian New Beat. I don't think was even a moniker at that point.
Right.
but they were our representative to that scene, and also mixing with, obviously, I guess what would later be strictly called industrial.
Yeah, electronic body music.
Sort of more. Yeah, you get like a fluid. Yeah, EBM. Yeah, you get this fluid sort of. Star incubator, you know what I mean? Where like you can't necessarily pigeonhole things, and they just sort of are happening.
Right.
And to me, that's when the most beautiful stuff happens, rather than the later derivative incarnation.
Sure. Absolutely. So the next track we're going to listen to is called Microphobia, which after we get back, I totally want to hear the story behind this one. Microphobia by Subsoma on X Studios Live. Microphobia. Now I'm just going to stare at you, Justin. Microphobia.
Excellent.
Tell me about microphobia. What the hell was that
No,
all about?
nothing is quite so comforting. So yeah, on a concept level, this is interesting because it's sort of the human fear of its own creation point. And microphobia literally, I guess, we translate into fear of small things. Specifically, in this case, I'm referring to, microprocessors and, electronics and but also like, I almost am channeling some Mary Shelley
Mm-hmm.
here, because it's sort of this like point where, Dr. Frankenstein is starting to fear his own
Mm-hmm.
creation. And so that's where I'm taking that tenor
Okay.
in that one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the drums are very getting back into the aggressive land there a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely put some post prod stuff on
Mm-hmm.
there. Some of these things I actually did a little running as I recorded pieces of them, recorded them through the heat,
Mm-hmm.
the analog heat,
Oh yeah.
to get a little bit of crunch.
Mm-hmm.
And in some cases, I'm using some tools, the D16 tool to do bit manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
So you get, you get that, and it's pretty cool.
Right.
Play. But yeah, I mean, and then the bass line, as we were talking about during the break, there is the SH-101 with a ton of delay on it. It's one of those synths that really was important historically, and sometimes I can just get some really cool stuff out of it and just let it go. I think it excels at bass lines. I don't really think, in my opinion, it's much of a lead machine.
Yeah.
It's not a bass like you would say, oh, I want that Moog bass sound. It's different. It's maybe more suited for synth pop, if I'm honest.
Yeah. I need that buzzy Vince Clarke sound.
Yeah, totally, absolutely.
Yeah,
But yeah, I did a lot with the Plogue vocals on this. So one of the things I did historically, at least in college, was I wrote music, and back then I was literally writing scores for like sort of I wouldn't say rock operas. They were musicals, right? And so some of the stuff there was I for the first time started thinking about vocal arrangements, almost like and one of my early bass and guitar teachers, a guy named Ken Leonard, who was in a band called Blue Luggage and a band called Emperor's New Clothes, who had gone to Oberlin and studied music and was a brilliant vocal arranger. And so I started thinking really about doing that, about using the Plogue stuff to do multiple layers and harmonies with itself. And so that was what I challenged myself to do.
The call and response thing that's going on in there is really kind of what's definitely shines in that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that was super intentional. Very challenging to get right.
Yeah, it's like Robo Church. I mean, with all those huge reverbs that are going on in there, it's just like what are you using for your reverbs, by the way? Because they sound so good.
Strange, you should ask. Yeah, so I use a terrible mix of stuff. I use the Eventide Black Hole, I think it's called, the plugin. Or even called Space. It's the Space pedal. It's the plug-in version of the Space pedal. And I also use Sparks reverb, Spark verb, and I also use occasionally. Yeah, I think those are the two. I use the D16 one, whose name is escaping me right now. But yeah, I use that sometimes. And I used to use on the first album I used Valhalla stuff, but I found it to be almost too much. Like if I made if I did like super, super dreamy, like Trent Muller kind of stuff, I would use it. But it's just too unmanageable in a mix for what I'm doing. But yeah, that plugin was not cheap, but it's probably the most powerful reverb plugin I've ever used.
The Valhalla or the?
Oh no, the Eventide.
Yeah, it sounds really good. I mean, it sounds like echoes off of buildings, which is I feel is kind of the idea.
Yeah, no, and to your point about using effects and pro audio as a musical expression tool, for sure, I spent a lot of time tweaking delays and reverbs to do that, to add to that. To the point where, and I was talking to some people about DAW-less jamming, and obviously Spooky, our project is DAW-less, and luckily the Electron stuff has great effects. But for this kind of projects, I am so heavily using the effects as an instrument. I almost need to give them writing credit.
Oh yeah, right. No, I understand. It's like anything I'm mixing, it's like there's like it's funny. I was going back and starting rehearsing the music for Plasma Blackout, and going back and just using what's on the Deluge and the Peak and the Hydrasynth compared to what I turned them into in the mix. And I'm like, shit.
Right.
It's like I want to go back and redo that. And it's like, this needs to be more insane, and this is clearly not panning enough for my tastes.
Yeah, absolutely.
These hi-hats are sitting in one spot in the stereo field. Unacceptable.
Yeah, for you that's just heresy.
Yeah, I know. If your hi-hats don't make you want to don't give you motion sickness, you're not doing it right.
Good stuff.
I did that way too much in the new stuff. No.
It's good.
Yeah, I guess. I like it, but I don't know if anyone else will. That's half the point, though.
Absolutely.
So where are we in the concept here? So at this point, we are re-examining what we've done to the machine, letting the machines do too much for us. Yeah,
the fear is kicking in, right? We haven't quite gotten into the fear and loathing stage. That's going to come later, but we're definitely starting to become worried. I think that we've ceded too much power.
Okay.
Now, and I'm trying to dodge the Skynet stuff. I'm trying to make this more like Isaac Asimov than Terminator, because I think the reality is more nuanced and not quite as psychotic as something.
Absolutely.
Like that.
Yeah. No, I can see that totally.
Because I remember the first thing that alerted me to this, and I've experimented with a number of platforms, and I won't list them, but that do machine learning specifically. Originally, I was working with sort of unsupervised learning algorithms, and now I'm more interested in deep learning. But you get to this point where, how much control do you cede to these things? Whether it's open loop or closed loop system, you still are ceding a lot of power. And one thing I found interesting that really tweaked my interest was, while you have almost sort of this class-based threat with robotics, right, where it's going to stop manufacturing, when you get into entire law firms becoming unnecessary because they can be replaced by AI, it really starts to have a deeper social impact, which is, I'm not saying that just because it's reaching maybe, a class, in any class in particular. It's just that it's moving into more and more and more spaces, to the point where, and albeit differently, I can see people, almost like, and I'll throw out a huge literary person, and so I will throw out Aldous Huxley here, because sort of his future in dystopia, I'm like Dystopia Incorporated for both of these albums, but definitely that kind of stuff where you see things to a point where you're no longer adapting, you're no longer interacting, you literally become a pile of skin that takes pharmaceuticals.
There's a point where innovation ceases and stagnation kicks in, and I feel that so far, it's been kind of cyclical.
Yeah, if you can use these tools to do stuff, very cool. Sure. I mean, interestingly, like the Jupiter X by Roland that we were just talking about the other day, that has their sort of AI or so-called driven, predictive, I would say, driven arpeggiation. That's really interesting. I mean, as long as you're harnessing that, I think it's fine. Right. But you come up with ethical questions like, who should be at the helm?
Right.
Should there be an effing off switch? I don't know. I mean, I would say maybe but At what point do you say this is a tool or this is now something I'm interacting
Right.
with?
Yeah. There's an ethical dilemma when it comes to,
Yeah.
over, what do we do with intelligence agents and AI and all that kind of stuff, and who's teaching them, what, and, it goes back to that, that thing that was discussed at MoogFest years ago about the Google image search algorithms
Yeah.
and how that was being, manipulated by racists.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't even want to get into the evil people do, but there's no question. There's no question that that's a huge element to this, because I mean, this type of stuff has huge implications for, cybersecurity.
Oh yeah. Right.
Both from the attackers and the defenders' perspective.
Totally.
Yeah. Totally.
Nice. So the next track we're going to be doing is called Baratna. Is that how you pronounce it? Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a shout out to James Corey and the Expanse series. It was it was the sort of little language there, the belter. It literally means brother.
Yep. Which it's the lyric, isn't it?
So it's talking. I've got the thing. I don't know if this is a good time to talk about this, but one of the things that's interesting about this thing is it started out saying brother and sister, and you can still hear it on this one. And we'll talk about what it's about afterward. But one of the things that's cool with this is that it does interpretive stuff, meaning like I will start it saying something and then it'll screw up the phonemes and start doing its own thing. And I thought that was delightful considering the theme, and so I just let it go.
Nice. All right. Well, here is Baratna by Subsoma here at Ix Studios Live. For folks just joining just now, my guest today is Justin Smith, also known as Subsoma. We're talking about his new album, Automation, which is available at xstudios.net. Amazingly enough, it's almost as if I'm, having my friends come on and promoting their stuff. Oh, nepotism. Whatever, it's my show. I can do what I want. So Justin, Bharatna. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on there.
Yeah, so definitely interesting. Yeah, it was sort of in the narrative story thing again. This is now the sort of cry for connection.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're at this point where the entity is not sure about where it's going to find that connection because it is its creator or should it talk to itself. And so that is kind of something that's happening there. It's definitely, you can even hear it in the vocals where it's like trying to sort of say, are you my brother? Are you my sister? Who are you? So yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But you're starting to get into this awareness stage where I think the tipping point for it is saying, look, maybe humans are a good partner for us. Maybe we need to sort of seek out each other, which is kind of creepy.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. But it's also like, it definitely reflects nicely into the current isolation mode that we're all in.
Yeah, that is so true.
Mm-hmm.
No question. Yeah.
John Haynes, hello, and thank you very much for the subscription. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
It's like, is it 5 months now he subscribed? Man, thanks, buddy.
Yeah, thank you.
You must be bored. No, I'm kidding. So your first album, Compartments, which came out a while ago, which is also for sale up on xstudios.net for 50% off if you enter automation as a code into the checkout when you buy it. And also a fucking brilliant album as well. But it's interesting, kind of going back and forth. It's one of the things I love doing when I buy, when an artist comes out with a new album is I'll go and listen to their entire back catalog and then end it with the newest one, obviously. It's like me in Star Wars movies. I do that
too. No, I totally get it.
So, and it's interesting listening to the difference of mood between Compartments and Automation. I found that this is a lot more kind of introspective feeling. On top of the concept that you're doing, there's kind of underlying bits of introspection kind of thing. And it's interesting in electronic music, especially stuff that generally the vocal without vocals or with more subdued, weird sounding stuff that doesn't exactly have words that are there to express. But just like, when you're doing more like a mood movement kind of thing or tone poem, I guess you would call it that. I don't know. But, let's talk a little bit about that and where you're coming from with that whole thing.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not sure how much of that was conscious and how much of that was just the phase of life I found myself in.
Mm-hmm.
But I was struggling with a lot of deep emotions in the last year. And like I said earlier, it's important to me to do that with electronic music in general. Because obviously I do like stuff that's very cold. And sometimes, I dig minimal Detroit techno, for example, which has no aspirations necessarily for being particularly dynamically emotional. Mm-hmm. But to me, it's definitely the concept of this album was, I started out with the concept rather than Compartments, which was like, I just want to do something and let's just start. So that helped guide my hand, I think, the entire way, which is that this is going to be about something. And even if it's not traditionally like, okay, this is the scene where this happens, it is more like a tone poem, like you say. It's more, this is where this feeling is happening, and I'm going to put this out there. Mm-hmm. So absolutely, that part was definitely intentional.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I found recently is really finding my emotional voice in creating electronic music, which is kind of weird in a way. Because you hear over and over again from people talking about how, like I said, how cold and unemotional and that kind of thing electronic music is, and going through and finding your voice through that whole thing, even from like a therapeutic standpoint or whatever, is kind of a weird place to be.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that I mean, I have played other instruments in my life,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that I came into synthesizers kind of sideways. I mean, I obviously loved a lot of 80s synth pop when it was happening. Maybe a little too young to really understand what was
Mm-hmm.
happening.
Sure.
But then you get to this point where I started out sort of playing drums and guitar and bass almost kind of at the same time, and ended up as a bass player, and then as a fretless bass player. I was
Mm-hmm.
hugely influenced by folks like Mick Karn of Japan and Dolly's Car, and so that was a space I was definitely heading into, and some of that mid to late stage Gary Newman fretless work, and that was I was in working with so many musicians, and so
Mm-hmm.
it was all about musicianship. Some of my early bands were, as you've been in bands, things can get very competitive, but it pushed me very hard to continue to be better and better as a musician. And I got to the point, and not to obviously self promote too much, I think I was a good fretless bass player, and I felt I was able to emote quite a bit on it, even
Mm-hmm.
more than say guitar, and it also fit into a space that I'm happy with, which is somewhere between the melody and
Mm-hmm.
so to me, like being able, and then I was in bands with keyboard players, and I was always futzing around on their keyboards and immediately playing was early a Y K3 was the
Mm-hmm.
first keyboard I really played on, and was like, gosh, this is great, this would be really cool, and it really sucked me in, and then just the ability to be able to do it yourself. So
Mm-hmm.
like unless you're like Prince and you had a studio available to you, it was difficult to like write your own music. I think I had a 4-track at the time, so limited for sure. Buying things like early sampler workstations that I used allowed me to do that. And so that's how Disraeli was later born, which is original 4 lineup was me and another keyboard player, but still it was all happening in this sequencer. And that freed you up, the MIDI world, to do so much
Mm-hmm.
that, but I did struggle with making things emotive. It was easy for me to make aggro music and
Right.
industrial.
Sure.
Obviously back in the day, our bands played together many times. And
Mm-hmm.
so you remember the sound I was getting there. It was
Oh, yeah.
crunchy. It was in your face.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, to get more subtle things, I think requires a lot more thought. I'm also a big fan of happy accidents.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the bass stuff that's happening is actually, I think, the PPG, and it's running through this sort of non-predictive delay.
Yeah, that delay is really weird on that.
Yeah, I was channeling some Massive Attack on
Mm-hmm.
sort of the bass is there, but you're not necessarily listening to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like the sound wouldn't sound the same without it, but it's not necessarily the point.
Right.
And for sure that was happening. Compulsion is maybe like that on the last album
Mm-hmm.
a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't mean to get too off track. I apologize. I hope
No,
I
that's
sort of
fine.
answered your question. But
Yeah.
yeah, I worked a lot of new stuff on this one. I brought out some Arturia stuff. I'll shout out to them again.
Mm-hmm.
But I started using their Mellotron and their Selena air string.
Was the
plugin.
Mellotron the pads that were in there?
There's a section where it sounds almost like an organ.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely the Mellotron doing
Yeah.
a string thing. Yeah.
Very, very, very very kind of ethereal, spooky, and sad kind of sounding.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm one of finding a place for them.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's with the Plasma Blackout. The first song I'm actually using piano sounds. I'm like, I've never used fucking piano sounds. What the fuck did I use piano for? But sure enough, and I mean, granted, I process the shit out of it, but it's still like, here's a piano sound, ding, yay,
Yeah,
which is
why
weird
not?
because I'm playing everything on the instrument, so playing natural sounds on an instrument that is unnatural.
Yeah.
It's kind of
absolutely.
a weird feel to it, especially when you're like sliding it and making the piano like unpiano-ish and stuff. And
I think that's pretty cool, actually.
That's
That's
interesting.
very, yeah.
weird, though.
Why not?
yeah,
Why not?
right.
I remember the EPS. I was able to, by default, So like they did some weird stuff with the 16 plus, but they had many layered patches. They broke up sort of sample layers and they would put them into patches, and then you could layer the patches, and then you could get a more organic sounding piano. And there was a Steinway one that I used a lot for when I was doing actual, like I said, dance and theatrical work.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember doing cool things like assigning the mod wheel to do something ridiculous to it. So like, you know, you're like, this is a pretty Steinway piano. Okay, no, it's some crunchy outer space, you know.
Yeah, when you take those things out of their element, for want of a better term, out of you know, when you remind people that it is being played through a synthesizer or something like that, and it's not, or a sampler in most cases. And all of a sudden, it's like it's pulling it out of that reality briefly, and it's a little bit disconcerting, since those are instruments that we've, you know, are so used to not doing that. So when you do those kinds of things to it, it adds a certain, like, you know, almost like a discomfort level for folks, which is good.
Yeah, I would say, and I will shout out my fellow Clevelander, but I would say that is one thing that Trent Reznor was able to do very successfully.
Mm-hmm.
And I know he used the Prophet VS quite a bit, which, while it was a fantastic, is wavetable synthesizer, vector synthesizer. It also, you know, because of the time period, the late 80s, was trying to at least attempt to emulate real acoustic instruments.
Right.
And one of the things that I like that he did is he would take those patches, I think, and just screw them the heck up. You know?
Yeah.
So you get these like tiny piano, like not tiny, like small, like piano sounds that are just like warped and messed up. You hear a lot of that on Downward Spiral, where you're like, what did you do to that thing?
Right.
Man?
Nice. So for folks that are just tuning in most recently, we are doing a raffle giveaway for the new Subsoma album, Automation. To sign up for the raffle, in the chat on Twitch, just do !raffle, and it will automatically sign you in. And I don't think anyone's really signed into it yet. So hopefully that just means you're just going to go to the website and buy the album, which we won't mind that either. Anyway, more music. Up next is Uncanny Valley. Uncanny Valley. Which is all about the second Tron movie, right? It's all about CGI Jeff Bridges' mouth, because that was so weird.
Isn't everything about that, though?
It's always the mouths that don't look right. Anyway. Uncanny Valley by Subsoma here at X Studios Live. Uncanny Valley. There's a certain feeling about that one. Maybe it's because it's like the sappy pads that make me so happy. I do love sappy pads. Oh,
Who doesn't love a sappy
oh
pad,
my
right?
God, sappy pads. That was the Rev 2, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is really good at that. I mean, it's I would say it's a standalone synth. Like just listening to the oscillators. I mean, the DCOs, they're not as maybe nice as the Prophet 6. Um, but I do find that it delivers in the pad area because I can do so much layering and splitting with it that yeah, it's massive.
One of the things about that song that I noticed when I was mixing it, as well as just going back and listening to it as many times as I have, is there's this noise that's going through the whole thing. It almost sounds like tape noise.
Yeah. So you caught me. You caught me. So I use two tape plugins. One is called DAW cassette, and it emulates old-fashioned cassette players, and I tend to put them on leads. And the other one is Satin by Yuhi, which is an old like Studer tape machine emulator. But I turn up the wow and flutter just to get that wobble.
I mean, it's weird because it almost sounds like wind, or like specifically like wind over treeless, like areas. Like Irish Sea kind of thing, maybe.
Yeah.
That kind of feel to it. It's got that whole like very large, wide field sound to it. That's just like, again, adds to certain like melancholy feelings and stuff like that, which. I feel that that's just, where we're at with Uncanny Valley. So where in our concept are we with that?
Yeah, so now we're in the fear and loathing stage.
Okay.
And so Uncanny Valley is no mistake. So it's a concept developed by a Japanese researcher. I'm probably going to mutilate this guy's name. I think it was Masahiro Mori. And he came up with this concept about how people were more comfortable with robots if they look more like humans. But only to a certain point. And then you got to this tipping point where they became repugnant to people. And I have felt that. I can't remember the gentleman's name. We talked about him before. Who does the bust, the mannequin head robot that has AI?
Oh yeah, Hanson Robotics.
Yeah. So, yes.
Yeah,
thank
David
you.
Hanson. Yeah, he's actually gonna be a guest on Rodney's show here soon.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. Did you ever seen his Philip K. Dick robot?
No.
Yeah, he made a Philip K. Dick robot too.
Why wouldn't you?
Apparently, Rodney had dinner with him.
That's so cool. Why not?
Yeah.
He probably was probably better behaved than the real Philip K. Dick. But yeah, for sure. Like, so yeah, that would be a great example. I find his work brilliant. I'm not in any way criticizing him.
Sure.
I'm just saying there is that point where you start to get a little bit like, and that's the Uncanny Valley is literally sort of like this dip in the, where it's like comfort. Ooh. You're in that space where you're not actually human, but you're not like not human, and you're this thing that I'm not cool with.
You're Jeff Bridges in the second Tron movie.
Thank you. We're back to Jeff Bridges. Yeah. But yeah, absolutely. And that's to me where this was going. Was now we're getting into this like, people are endlessly capable of being horrible, and sort of turning on their own creation in a weird way, right?
No, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, musically, it did a lot of different stuff with this. And I'm glad you brought up the noise because I do really love inserting noise. And I know many people have talked about this recently, but I think that adding noise into your mix while the movement now is so, and I mostly hear popular music in ride shares, but I will say listening to the mixing of it, everything is in its place.
Right.
Super, super clean, super compressed mixes. I blame, Dead Mouse for this sort of style.
Dead Mouse 5.
Dead Mouse 5, yeah. Of just, super crisp and super, all tracks are totally segregated. Whereas with noise, you listen to 80s music and there's a lot more noise just because of probably the need in the desks and the equipment they were using. but it created some richness and some harmonic beauty that I think is missing from a lot of modern music. And I'm not criticizing modern music or the styles. I'm just saying that this is something I wanted to do, was insert that for sure.
That makes sense. Yeah, and I think that's there's certain. It's weird because like tape noise or that kind of thing, mixer artifacts and all that kind of stuff kind of sometimes will glue those mixes together in a way that you can't do it if you're just going literally, nothing but silence and nothing but digital pureness and stuff like that when you're doing recording and stuff like that. Sometimes you want to have that little bit gruff and rough sound to it, some hiss, and that kind of stuff, because it might hide the stuff that you're fucking up with.
Yeah.
And
I think controlled noise is a good
sure.
way.
Well, yeah, it's just like adding reverb to your vocals because they're not the best. That kind of thing. I did that all the time.
Absolutely. Speaking of that, oddly, that lead line, which people have commented to me that what analog synth do usually do that.
Right.
Oh no, son, that's the Roland JV 1080.
There you go.
And what I did is I created a patch to do a lot of pitch modulation to give it that sort of unease.
that little bit of audio drift there that happens there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, surprisingly, the JV can do that.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Yeah, totally digital, totally Rompler, world. But yeah, so the lead line that we're talking about during the break, that sort of seagull-y line.
Yeah.
And I'm not quite Adrian Belew. I can't make seagull sounds with the guitar, but what it was I was trying to find a lead and it was struggling with it, and you know how you do it, and you just keep switching between outboard or plugging or whatever. And so I was playing something, and then I came back to it, and it had switched tracks. So I started playing the lead line, except now I was on one of the vocal tracks, but I'm way up the scale, and I'm like, holy crap, this sounds cool. So I think so much of electronic music, maybe all music, is you can't predict the happy accidents,
right.
But by God, know when they're happening and and keep them.
Sure. No, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's part of the joys of doing all of the studio stuff that we do is it gives us an opportunity to discover those things.
Yeah, for sure.
All the different phases of music creation, which is important, I think, a very important part of it. So the next track we have is my personal favorite. I had way too much fun with this one. to the point where you're like, dude, you need to calm that shit down. So this next track is called Nomad, and here it is. This is Nomad by Subsoma here at X Studios Live. song's so fucked up sounding.
I am in a minute.
Do you know where an extension cord is?
Hi, Jody. So while they're dealing out extension cord issues, that was Nomad by Subsoma. Who is my guest right now, Justin, also known as Subsoma. Yeah, dude, that song kicks your ass a little bit.
Well, it's
jumping out of like the chill and sad zones. All of a sudden, you're Nomad, and everything's exploding.
Yeah, I was sort of a tip of the hat to some more modern-y stuff there.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely bands like Boys Noise and some of those more modern things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a big, huge bass music fan. Not that I dislike it, I just don't listen to a ton of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I was never really a big dubstep person, obviously, either. But again, perfectly valid genre. So to me, like taking, like I do with everything else, like going through the scrap heap of whatever and pulling out things. Wanted to get a little of that pumping going,
Mm-hmm.
do a track like that. And that I will shout out to you as a post-production marvel because of the way we had to do that to create, for the listeners who haven't listened to this track 800 times like Andrew and I have had to. There's that sort of pumping sound, and that was initially all we had, and it was panned centrally, and we duplicated it, and then Andrew did really fancy panning automation, and then we pumped up the compression on the original one, and then had to place it in EQ, so you actually got two lines happening at once,
Mm-hmm.
which I think worked a great, which is my favorite part of that track.
Yeah,
to be totally honest.
Yeah, and it sounds. I like the sucking sound mixed with the with kind of like that keyboard line that's going da 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 kind of stuff going in there. Just makes it sound like it's one piece.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
One of those things I probably would have scrapped again. I think Jody probably saved that one too. Mostly because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm getting way off target in terms of what I'm doing. But sometimes it's like, no, you can bring it in.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, and we've been streaming way too much and binging on the Orphan Black series because I never watched any of it.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes these tracks sort of like you feel like it's like, okay, this is the next clone, and what's going to be weird about this one, But yeah, I mean, this track was also sort of like Nomad was the thing, and it was more about searching for the identity.
Mm-hmm.
So now we've gotten to that point where the entity's searching for some kind of identity. It feels cast, away and sort of lost. And I guess nomadic, nomadic from a metaphorical rather than actual perspective.
Sure. I'm just imagining, robots like going through the desert wastelands.
Yeah, which they could probably do with more efficacy than us humans.
Right?
But.
Like the Boston Dynamics dog robots going, I am Nomad, and taking off and running across the sand for a while.
Oh, yeah. With K9 from Doctor Who on its tail, right? Yeah.
Trying to keep up as best as it can and not doing such a good job of it.
No, K9 not good for desert.
No,
not good.
No.
Water, sand, all things K9 is not suited for.
Jumping.
Same with the Daleks.
Yeah, climbing stairs.
Until we realized that they could levitate, which frankly was fixed later in the reboots.
Right.
But yeah, seriously, it's a different track. I mean, I didn't have a dance hall thing in mind, but I definitely wanted this to be more sort of that way, And so, yeah, I mean, while maybe this wasn't a hardcore conceptual one at first, I started sprinkling that sort of dust on there to sort of get it happening.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds good, though. Any weird production things that you did as far as that one's concerned?
Well, obviously, the thing that we just described, which was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we, again, during the break we mentioned this, but I tried to inject some music, so some of the lead lines and some of the little key lines. The one key line was a definite influence of Jean-Michel Jarre, and I love the way, especially in Oxygen, he would bring you back into this music because you're sort of floating in space, and then all of a sudden he's anchored you with some really cool, I guess, lick, for lack of a better word, where now you're paying attention to the music, and to me that's kind of what that was, to anchor it, because I can't get away with not being melodic. I'm apparently addicted to melodic.
Something wrong with that.
So, Yeah.
You know, a good melody now and again.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
You know, that's what I'm here for.
Yeah,
Encouragement.
I'm no Paul McCartney, but maybe I hope when I'm 110, like I think he might be. I look as good as he does.
Well, I think he's got some enhancements going on too.
Yeah,
Especially the
absolutely.
breast enhancements, probably. So
Good times.
yeah, right. So our last track is called Danza, Danza, or
Danza.
Danza, Danza. It's like salsa. So let's take a listen to this, and then we'll talk about this one too. So this is Danza by Subsoma here at X Studios Live. Danza. So that was Danza by Subsoma, who is the guest today here at Ix Studios. That was the last track on the Automation album. So let's talk about this. This is nuts. This song is like, when the actual melody comes in, it's almost a relief. Not because it's a bad thing. It's just that it's just so like there's a lot of like, it's almost uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Which is good. Again, it's not a bad. I'm not saying it in like in a shitty way. It's just more along the lines.
No,
it expresses itself quite nicely.
So weird thing here. I mean, this is the one I toiled on the most.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the concepts I had, if you've listened to any of these sort of AI created music, you'll notice that it's doing something that is maybe suiting its own sensibilities, whatever that is, but isn't always quite pleasing to your ear as a human. And so the point where this is happening in the story is that now there's sort of a contentment and independence, meaning that now it's like, okay, we're not going to try to be human because we're not, we're another life form. Let's sort of be comfortable with that. And here's what I'm comfortable with. And, whether it's like in a, humans do this too, when you get into weird, like, especially some of the aesthetic movements, like sort of that happened on YouTube and other places in the earlier part of the last decade. Oh my gosh, with like vaporwave and C-punk stuff, where like it's like, this seems kind of glitchy and not comfortable.
Right.
And to me, that's where I felt that AI would do stuff because it would adjust to its own sensibilities. And then, I know that sounds unbelievably heady and probably pretentious, but that's kind of what I was trying to do. Not at first, because at first it was just a couple of things, and then crafting it to be that.
Sure. So this was one of those. This is one of the tracks we were talking during the music that was almost thrown out.
Yeah, I do many drafts, and a lot of them get tossed in the bin. This one I kept because I thought it had deep potential. You couldn't get it. I couldn't get where I needed it to go. So, you just put things in the back burner and you hope you can resuscitate.
Right.
And once I'd done some of the other tracks and I knew where the album was going, I said, okay, I can fix this now.
Yeah, and then this was also one that was like, this song was fixed in the master.
Yeah,
which is crazy because we had a tough time getting that kick to do what we wanted it to do.
Yeah,
it was
beat it over the head.
It was a pitch.
I have to talk to Adam about how he did it.
Yeah,
I speculate he either used some of the RX magic where he goes in and draws over stuff, or he could have just used one of his sweet outboard compressors.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, talk about a strong relationship with your mastering engineer, right?
Yeah, no, Adam Bruce is an amazing human being.
Yeah,
I'd like to thank him.
He'll go way out of his way to make sure things go well and sound amazing and stuff like that.
Yeah, and is a very talented songwriter, musician in his own right.
Yeah,
and I think that's why there's a lot of trust for those of us previously and currently of the Cleveland music scene. Is he's well known,
especially with electronic music. So I mean, that's just like.
Yeah,
he knows it well enough to kind of get a good idea where you're going with it and what and kind of help you finish the conversation that you started sometimes, especially when you're realizing that you're using a hack like me to mix your music for you.
Oh no, you're not a hack.
Whatever.
Give yourself some credit.
I'm an excellent hack. So this is that's the last track in that, and it kind of leaves us at a cliffhanger in a way.
Yeah, kind of.
Is that intentional?
Yes and no. It was only intentional at the very end, maybe, because it was literally the day I had to turn the tracks over to Adam that Jody and I sat and talked about the track order in great detail. We'd done it once before, and I thought I had a cut, and then it was like, oh, we need to think about this some more. And so that's kind of where it ended up there, I think. It was the end of the story, and it was also sort of like, you know.
The end? Question mark.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'll do more in this exact theme or not,
Mhm.
but we'll see.
So what's coming up next for Subsoma?
Yeah, so subsoma is probably I'll probably start in a little bit. Need to sort of. I'm one of those folks. I'm pretty mercurial. Always got a number of things going. I know
Sure.
you and I are planning on, and with John Coleman. Shout out to John, to work on some stuff together, which is a label-wide effort, which is a new thing for us. To do soundtrack work, and I think the Metropolis thing is something we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also doing a little bit of that. I'm working on a project that I only have one track for that is a little bit different. It's more like sort of 80s Tangerine Dream oriented, no drums, if you can believe that.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, so I've got one track, but it's like it's really this was a big expenditure for me mentally and emotionally. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm only sort of playing with stuff. Like I've been playing with guitar stuff too. I might do something there. So maybe more traditional sort of music format stuff. So there's a lot of things that might be coming up, but nothing definite yet. So stay tuned.
Are you still working on the patches as well?
Oh yes, I've totally forgot. So yeah, I'm doing a patch bank for the ASM Hydrosynth. I've got about 10 patches that I'm happy with.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got a lot of work to do. But that's a fun project, and I know that's a X-wide thing because
Oh,
you're
yeah.
working on peak stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which is fun because now Peak just updated with custom wavetables, so I don't know if I'm going to take advantage of that or not. So
Oh yeah. Is John Information Tray working on
I
patches?
think Information Tray said he was working on possibly live patches of some kind.
Yeah, that would be super cool.
Mm-hmm. Although he just got
Yeah.
some new gear as well, so maybe he'll be noodling
Nice.
with that too. Who knows?
I will say this about the ASM, and I know there's kind of like a West Coast East Coast Pepsi Coke battle between the Argon 8 and the Hydrosynth.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the Hydrosynth, and I don't have an Argon 8, so I can't talk. It sounds great. Modal Electronics are great. They make great stuff. And I'm sure probably the raw sound of them is very good. But writing patches on the Hydrosynth is the most fun I've had writing patches almost ever. So shout out to Glenn Darcy and his folks I got to talk to Glenn and Dominic from ASM at NobCon last year. Very, very cool guys, super passionate about what they do.
Oh yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah, it was pretty slick. It's a great piece of gear. I have the desktop version of it, and it's all over the place on Plasma Blackout. It's like,
Awesome. That's great.
So, well, cool. I think that we're about ready to wrap up here. So, I would like to thank you, Justin, for hanging out with me today.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it was a good time. Thanks everyone on the chat line for keeping things real, I guess. No one that I saw signed up for the raffle, so no one wins. So that means everyone that's on can go to ixstudios.net and you can pick up the new CD, the new release by Subsoma called Automation, and you can also pick up Compartments, Subsoma's first album, for 50% off if you enter the word automation into the checkout when you add that to your cart. So again, thank you all so much. Thank you, Justin. We're going to go ahead and raid over to Mianao, who's probably doing some crazy weird shit, which is even better than not going anywhere. So hope you all take care. Next week, I'll be on here probably doing the deep dive of the MS-2000. So if you are a nut for synthesizers and a nut for early 21st century virtual analog, who isn't, then join me. Make sure to hit the follow button so you'll know when that's happening. And if you really love me, you'll subscribe to us too.
Yeah, I'd like to thank everybody that did already purchase the album or support us. So,
Absolutely. Yes, we appreciate that too.
Please dive into X Studios and look at all we have to offer. We got lots of stuff.
We have a whole shit ton of things. We're busy people. So anyway, cheers again. Thank you all so much for joining. This has been X Studios Live with a guest Subsoma. If you're tuned in at the end of this, you can go ahead and watch it on YouTube because it's over there as well. Just go and look up Ick Studios. Cleveland, it should be up on that. So until then, hope everyone has a great day, a great weekend. Stay healthy, stay safe, stay lonely, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.